There is a loaf of bread on your kitchen counter right now, and it is dying 2 different deaths at the same time. If you baked it or brought it home 3 or 4 days ago, the crumb in the middle has already begun to turn dry and chalky, and by the weekend you will be sawing at it and calling it stale. And if you did the very thing the world told you to do, if you slid that loaf into your refrigerator to make it last longer, you did not save it. You hurt it. That cold shelf is turning your bread stale nearly 3 times faster than your own counter would. There is a plain wooden cupboard in my kitchen, and a loaf of bread sits inside it for 2 weeks and comes out soft enough to fold. It costs almost nothing to do. Stay with me. My name is Mammi Sarah. I am Amish, and I keep an old order home here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I have baked the bread for my family in this same kitchen for more than 40 years, and in all that time, I have never owned a refrigerator, a bread machine, or one of those plastic sleeves with the little twist tie. I bake on Friday morning, 6 loaves at a time, the same as my mother did, and her mother before her. And the loaf we cut into on the second Thursday after, 12 and 13 days down the line, is still soft enough to fold a slice in half without it cracking. Not hard, not green with mold, soft. I am going to show you exactly what I do, in the order I do it, with the one cheap thing you need, and just where to set your loaf so it keeps. And then I am going to tell you the part that should sit a little uneasy with you, which is that the soft bread you buy at the store was built in a laboratory to fail on a schedule, and the cold box humming in your kitchen, the one you were told would save your food, is the very thing killing your bread the fastest. None of this is a secret. It has been written down plain for 100 years. It is just quiet, because there is no money in saying it out loud. By the end of this, you will keep a loaf fresh for 2 weeks in a cupboard, the way my grandmother did, for the price of a dish towel. Let me start with what nearly everyone gets wrong, because if you do not understand this one thing, none of the rest will make a lick of sense. Bread does not simply go bad. Bread goes bad in 2 completely different ways, and the 2 ways are opposites of each other, and the reason you keep losing your bread is that you have been fighting the wrong one. The first way is drying. That is when the loaf goes hard and crumbly and stale, when the knife shudders through it and the crumbs scatter. The second way is molding. That is when it goes damp and spotted and turns green in a corner overnight. Now here is the trap, and it is a cruel one. Everything you do to stop the one speeds up the other. If you wrap your bread up tight in plastic to stop it drying out, you trap all the loaf's own moisture against the crust, and in 3 days you have grown mold. If you leave it open to the air to keep the mold away, you let it dry into a brick by Sunday. And if you put it in the refrigerator to stop the mold, and this is the unkindest trick of them all, you dry it out 3 times faster than if you had just left it on the counter. Cold does not keep your bread fresh. Cold stales it. So the whole art of keeping bread is not picking one side of that fight. It is holding the middle, a little air, a little moisture, and the right steady temperature, all 3 held in balance at once. And there is one humble old object that holds that balance better than anything a company ever sold you, sitting in plain sight for 200 years while everyone walked right past it. This is what we have always done. When I was a girl, my grandmother baked in a wood cook stove every Friday, and the bread she pulled from that oven had to feed a table of 11 souls clear through to the next Friday. There was no running to the store on a Tuesday. If the bread went hard or went moldy by Wednesday, the family went without, and I never in my life met an Amish grandmother who would stand for that. So she kept her bread in a cupboard built for exactly this one purpose, a tall wooden cabinet with 2 little doors, and set into the front of each a panel of punched tin, small holes hammered through the metal in a pattern of stars and hearts and tulips. The English who buy them at auction call it a pie safe. We only ever called it the bread cupboard. Those little holes were not just for prettiness. They let the bread breathe, just the smallest bit, while they kept the strong light and the flies and the fast-moving air of the room out. My mother had one against the north wall of her kitchen. I have the very one my grandmother used, worn pale and smooth where 4 generations of women have laid their hands. And the loaf I set inside it on a Friday is still good the following week, every single week, the same as it was in 1890 when my great-grandmother set her own loaf in her own. So here is exactly what I do, and you can do every bit of it in your own kitchen this week, whether or not you have some fine old cupboard with punched tin. You need one thing to begin, and it is a piece of cloth. Not plastic, not a paper bag, cloth. I use a plain unbleached linen bread bag, the kind you can buy for about $7 and use for the rest of your life. Or, cheaper still, you can make your own out of a flour sack towel for about $2. Linen is the finest thing there is for holding bread because it does the one job that matters. It breathes slowly. It lets just enough moisture out that the crust does not go soft and damp and moldy, and it holds just enough in that the crumb inside does not dry away to dust. Plastic cannot do that. Plastic holds everything in, right up tight against the crust, and mold is the certain end of it. A bare paper bag cannot do it either, for it lets everything out, and your loaf is a rock by the second morning. Linen sits right in the middle, which is exactly where bread wants to be. And if you have no linen, a clean flour sack towel, the flat woven kind with no fuzzy nap on it, folded around the loaf, works nearly as well. Before I set that loaf in anything, though, one small thing must come first, and skipping it undoes everything after. You must let your bread cool all the way through before you wrap it or shut it away. Not warm, not even a little warm in the middle, but cool clear to the center, which takes a good 2 or 3 hours on a rack. A warm loaf shut up in cloth or a box will sweat, the way a man sweats under a wool coat, and that sweat is water, and that water is the very moisture the mold has been waiting for. Many a good loaf has been lost not to bad storing, but to hasty storing. Now here is the first part of the trick that nobody teaches anymore, and it is so simple you will not believe it makes a bit of difference until you try it. You do not slice the loaf across the middle and lay it on its side with 2 open faces gaping at the air. You cut your bread from one end, straight down, 1 slice at a time as you need it, and then you stand the rest of the loaf back up on its own cut face, flat down against a clean, bare wooden board. The cut side, the open wound of the loaf, pressed right down against the wood. Why on earth would you do that? Because that cut face is the only weak place on the whole loaf. It is the one spot where the soft inner crumb is laid open to the air with no crust to guard it. The crust, you see, is nature's own wrapper. It was baked hard and dark for exactly this purpose, to seal the moisture inside the loaf and keep the air out. So you leave that crust doing the job the oven gave it, all the way around, and the one open place, the cut face, you press down against the wood. The bare wood takes up the smallest whisper of moisture and gives it right back, and it never lets that open face dry out. Set the loaf cut side down on a plain wooden board, wrap the whole of it loose in your cloth, and set it in the cupboard. That right there is the heart of the whole matter. Then here is the second part of the trick, and this is the one that turns a single week into 2. You set one small thing in the cupboard alongside the bread. My mother always used a stalk of celery. My grandmother used half an apple. Either one does the work. A cut stalk of celery, or a half of an apple laid cut side up, gives off a slow and steady breath of moisture, the very smallest amount, into the closed-up cupboard. It keeps the air all around your loaf from ever going bone dry, and bread simply cannot dry out in air that is kept gently, faintly damp. So you lay a single stalk of celery beside the loaf, and every 3 or 4 days, when it goes limp, you take it out and put in a fresh piece and eat the old one. That is the whole of it. A nickel's worth of celery from the garden, and your loaf holds soft clear through a second week. Now, I must be plain with you here. If you live somewhere already, very damp, down along the coast, or in the deep humid south where the summer air hangs wet as a dish rag, you skip this part altogether because your own air is wet enough as it is, and adding 1 drop more will only invite the mold you were trying to keep out. You must read your own kitchen. But in most of this country, in a normal house in a normal season, the celery is exactly what buys you that second week. And here is the last piece, and it is about where you set the cupboard, because temperature is the quiet hand behind all of it. You want your bread cool, but you never want it cold. A cupboard on an inside wall, away from the stove, away from the sunny window, away from any heat at all, is just right. A pantry does beautifully. A low cabinet on the cool north side of the kitchen. Somewhere between 60 and 70 degrees is the sweet spot, and here is the wonder of it, that is just plain room temperature in most houses, which is the very reason the cupboard has always worked and the refrigerator never will. You are not trying to make the bread cold. You are trying to keep it steady, cool, and dark, held away from the drying heat and the killing cold both. And a wooden box does that far better than a metal one, for the wood breathes and does not sweat the way cold metal does. Now let me tell you plainly why the refrigerator is the worst place you could ever set a loaf of bread, because once you understand it, you will never do it again. When bread bakes, the starch inside it drinks up water and swells open and soft, and that swelling is what makes fresh bread tender. But as the loaf sits and ages, that starch slowly gives the water back up and tightens and hardens again, drawing itself back toward the hard, dry thing it was before it ever went in the oven. The bakers have a long name for this. They call it starch retrogradation. I do not bother with the Latin of it. I just call it the starch going back to sleep. And here is the piece that changes everything. That hardening does not happen fastest when the bread is warm, and it does not happen at all when the bread is frozen hard as a stone. It happens fastest of all, right around 40 degrees above zero. And 40 degrees, wouldn't you know it, is very near exactly the temperature inside your refrigerator. The cold box in your kitchen is set, near as makes no difference, to the one temperature on all the earth that stales your bread the very fastest. A loaf left on the counter at 70 degrees stays soft 2 and 3 times longer than that same loaf laid on the cold shelf. This is not some notion of mine passed down with the quilts. Any baker worth his flour knows it. Cold does not preserve your bread. Cold is what ruins it, quietly, from the first hour. The mold is a different creature, and the cloth and the cool cupboard handle that one too. Mold is a living thing, a tiny spore floating unseen in the air of every kitchen that lands on the damp surface of the loaf and takes root. It needs 3 things to get its hold: moisture, warmth, and stillness. The linen cloth carries the loaf's extra surface moisture gently away so the spore has no wet place to settle into. The cool cupboard keeps the warmth down, so what does grow, grows slow. And here is why the old sourdough loaves my grandmother baked lasted the longest of all. A naturally leavened bread, raised slow with a sourdough start instead of quick with a spoon of store yeast, comes out of the oven a little bit sour, a little bit acid, all the way through its crumb. And mold has no liking for acid. That gentle tang, the very thing that makes good sourdough taste the way it does, is a natural guard against mold that a soft white sandwich loaf simply has not got in it. So if you truly want the 2 full weeks, bake or buy yourself a real sourdough, a proper crusty round loaf, and leave the soft sliced kind on the shelf. Now I have to be honest with you, because honest is worth a great deal more than impressive, and this is the very part the people selling you things will never once say out loud. This will not work on the soft bread in the plastic bag from the store shelf. That sliced sandwich bread was never built to keep, honestly. It keeps because it is full of things with long chemical names, preservatives and dough conditioners and mold inhibitors, all stirred into it at the factory so it can ride a truck for a week and still look alive when you carry it home. You cannot out-cupboard a loaf like that, and truth be told, you would not want to try. The cupboard trick is for real bread. Real bread is flour, water, salt, and a leaven, and nothing else, and real bread is honest, which is only to say it is alive, and being alive, it can spoil, and it is your own good sense that must keep it. So use your eyes and use your nose. If ever you see so much as a single spot of mold on a loaf, do not simply cut the spot away and eat the rest. Mold sends roots down deep through the whole loaf that your eyes cannot follow, and the safe thing is to give that loaf to the chickens or the compost heap and start fresh. Bread is cheap. Your health is not. And understand me, I am telling you how the old folks kept their bread, not handing you a promise on every loaf in every kitchen. Great heat and heavy damp and a poor loaf to begin with can beat any trick a woman knows. Read your own bread and let it tell you. So think for a quiet moment about who gains when you believe that bread lasts only 3 days and belongs on a cold shelf. The companies that bake the bread gain, because a loaf that goes hard and moldy fast is a loaf you throw in the bin and drive right back to the store to buy over again. In this country, we throw away a truly astonishing amount of the bread we buy, a great fat share of every loaf straight into the waste. And every loaf you waste is a loaf you must purchase twice. The company that sold you the plastic bag it molded inside of gains. The company that sold you the very refrigerator that staled it gains and smiled while it told you the cold was doing your food a kindness. Now, I do not for one moment believe there was ever a meeting where wicked men sat down and agreed to hide the bread cupboard from you. I do not believe in that kind of conspiracy. What there is instead is something quieter, and in its own way, a good deal worse. It is a whole world full of people who every one of them make their living from you buying more bread more often, and not a single one of them has any reason to teach you how to make a loaf last 2 weeks in a wooden box for the price of a dish towel, so no one teaches it. It was never locked away in a vault. It only went quiet, the way anything goes quiet when there is no money in saying it aloud. And there is something bigger here than a loaf of bread. And I feel the whole weight of it every Friday morning when the kitchen fills up warm with that smell that no factory has ever once matched. A woman who can keep her own bread does not need to ask anyone's leave, and does not have to hurry to a store when the weather turns hard, or the road shut over with snow, or the money runs thin at the end of a long month. Our bishop is fond of saying that a full cupboard is a quiet heart, and he has the right of it. When you know that the thing which feeds your family is under your own roof, in your own 2 hands, made by you and kept by you and answering to no company and no bill, you are simply not so easily frightened by the wide world and all its noise. My grandmother lived through winters so hard that the bread cupboard stood as the plain difference between a family fed and a family hungry, and she never once spoke of it as a hardship. She spoke of it as a freedom. And so, all these years on, do I. That plain wooden box with its little punched tin stars is worth more to me than the finest machine money could buy, because it asks nothing of me, and it has not once in 100 years sent anybody a bill. So here is what I want you to do this very week. Get yourself a real loaf of bread, a proper crusty sourdough if you can come by one, made of nothing but flour, water, salt, and leaven. Find yourself a piece of linen or a plain flat cotton flour sack towel, about $7 for the good linen bag that lasts a lifetime, about $2 for the towel, and set the plastic aside for good. Let your loaf cool all the way through before you wrap it. Cut your bread from one end, a slice at a time, and stand the loaf back up on its cut face against a clean, bare wooden board, so the good hard crust guards every side, but the one open place you have sealed down against the wood. Wrap it loose in your cloth. Set it in a cupboard, or a low cabinet, or a pantry on a cool inside wall, well away from the stove and the sun, and never, not ever, in the refrigerator. And if your house runs dry, lay a single stalk of celery in there beside it and change it out every few days. That is the whole of it. $2, a wooden board you likely already own, and a nickel's worth of celery. And your bread will still be soft and good next week, and soft and good the week after that. Tell me in the comments down below what you have been doing with your bread all this time, and whether you were one of the great many good folks who were told, same as I was told by the English long ago, to keep it in the refrigerator. And tell me where it is you live, and whether your house runs damp or dry through the year, because that one thing changes whether you want the celery or not, and I read every single one of these, every night by the lamp. And if this was of some use to you, a little tap on that like button helps an old woman's plain kitchen wisdom find its way to one more family who was never once told any of it. Next time, I am going to show you just what my grandmother did with the heel and the hard end of every loaf that did happen to get away from us, because in a plain house, nothing at all is ever thrown away while there is a use left in it. It involves a stone crock, a clean square of cloth, and one thing you already pour down your own kitchen sink every single day, and by the time I am through, you will never look at a hard, dry end of bread the same way again. Until then, keep your bread in the cupboard, keep it out of the cold, and remember, The people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only starting to remember.